Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to do something a bit different. We are going to look past all the usual political rhetoric and talking points to objectively examine the actual economic mechanics of Scandinavia. We hear about these countries all the time in debates about government and economics, but we rarely look at the nuts and bolts of how they actually function. So, our focus today is to uncover exactly why Nordic nations embrace capitalism so fiercely just to keep their systems running. Let's get right into it.
All right, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to tackle the Nordic socialist myth, explore the free market engine, review Sweden's historical market reversal, break down how Nordic taxes work, and finally, uncover the crucial role of trust. Section 1, the Nordic socialist myth, peeling back the layers. Okay, let's dive into this. When we look at Scandinavia, we immediately see these incredibly thick, highly visible layers of a generous welfare state, things like universal healthcare and subsidized college. It's all so generous that a lot of people immediately label these nations as socialist. But actually, the leaders of these nations firmly reject that label. There's this really remarkable statement from former Danish Prime Minister Anders Fogh Rasmussen. While speaking in the US, he directly addressed this misconception, stating plainly, Denmark is far from a socialist planned economy. Denmark is a market economy. This really pulls back the curtain, showing us the raw, capitalist canvas underneath. The people actually running these countries want the world to know they are definitely not a planned socialist state. Section 2, the free market engine, the foundation of the system. Now, what's really interesting here is if they aren't socialist planned economies, what exactly is holding up all those generous social benefits? Well, the answer is highly competitive capitalism. According to the data, the core pillars here are strong property rights, private ownership, vibrant entrepreneurship, and totally open trade. In fact, nations like Denmark routinely rank among the absolute freest capitalist economies in the world. They expect their businesses to ruthlessly compete on a global scale, rather than just hiding behind government protection. And honestly, you know this to be true because you probably use their products every single day. The Nordic countries are filled with massive, incredibly innovative private companies. Just think of global giants like Volvo, Ericsson, Lego, and Spotify. These governments don't resent successful private companies. They actively expect them to succeed globally. And why is that? Because these massive corporations generate the vital tax revenue that is absolutely essential to support their expansive welfare systems. Basically, without successful business, there is no generous welfare state. Section 3, Sweden's historical market reversal, a lesson in economics. You see, the Nordic model wasn't always this perfectly balanced machine. Let's actually walk through this timeline, because it's fascinating. During the post-war decades, Sweden dramatically expanded its government spending, regulations, and taxes. But by the 1970s and 80s, that economic engine really started to spire. Growth slowed down, investments weakened, and they experienced something called capital flight. Massive entrepreneurs literally packed up and left. The owners of IKEA relocated to the Netherlands, and Tetra Pak moved over to Switzerland. Sweden's standing among wealthy nations fell sharply. But they didn't double down on the regulations. Instead, in the 1990s, they orchestrated a massive course reversal. Just look at the specific capitalist reforms Sweden enacted in the 90s. They aggressively reduced business regulations and reformed their pension systems. Amazingly, they even introduced private competition into education. Today, more than 800 independent schools operate there with public funding. They even privatized a substantial share of their primary health centers. And here's the real kicker. These reforms were enacted by both left and right-wing governments. It was a completely bipartisan acknowledgement of a simple mathematical truth. You absolutely must create wealth before you can distribute it. Section 4, how Nordic taxes work, funding the welfare state. Let's move on and see how this builds. Because a massive safety net requires massive funding, we have to ask, who is actually footing the bill? While there's a really common perception out there that Nordic governments fund everything simply by shaking down billionaires, but the data shows this is entirely false. The actual target? It's everyone. The cashier, the plumber, the teacher, the nurse, and the mechanic, they all carry the financial weight through really broad income and payroll taxes. The system works because everyone pays into it, not just the ultra-wealthy. To really put that into perspective, just think about this number, 25%. In Denmark and Sweden, a value-added tax, or VAT, of around 25% is applied to everyday purchases. Buying shoes, picking up some furniture, or just sitting down for a restaurant dinner, a massive 25% chunk of your bill goes straight to the government. This is a huge consumption tax, and it impacts everyday working people right at the bottom of the economic ladder. Now, what's even more surprising is the truth about how they treat accumulated wealth. The reality is that several Nordic countries have actually abolished their wealth taxes entirely. Sweden currently has absolutely no inheritance tax, and Norway is actively debating reducing its wealth taxes right now because high net worth individuals are leaving the country. Policymakers there rolled back these specific taxes because they learned the hard way that capital, entrepreneurs, and investments, well, they simply move across borders when they feel overtaxed. And what about healthcare? It's really important to clarify that Nordic healthcare isn't magically free. It's paid for by the citizens consistently throughout their entire working lives. And many of these systems still require out-of-pocket copayments for doctor visits, specialist care, or prescription drugs. The bill never goes away. It just arrives in a different envelope, paid for by the general taxpayer.
Section 5. The crucial role of trust. The invisible capital.
This right here is the secret sauce. It's the vital, often overlooked cultural ingredient required for this specific economic system to function smoothly without collapsing. We're talking about social trust. Basically, this is the belief that your neighbors will generally obey the rules and that your institutions are reliable and free of broad corruption. Scandinavian countries have historically boasted the absolute highest trust levels in the world, and this social capital is incredibly valuable because it drastically lowers transaction costs. It simplifies regulation and allows their massive government systems to function efficiently with far fewer layers of policing and enforcement.
But the source offers a pretty stark warning about this invisible capital. Trust takes generations to develop, but man, once it's gone, it is gone. You cannot simply legislate social trust into existence, and it's highly vulnerable. Issues like changing border situations or rising government corruption can erode this public confidence very quickly. If the trust disappears, the efficiency of the entire Nordic model goes right out the window with it. And this brilliantly illustrates the whole concept, using a great metaphor from the source. Imagine a championship football team. You wouldn't say their secret to winning is their fancy, highly visible stadium, right? The stadium represents the generous welfare benefits. But what you aren't seeing is the grueling, unseen discipline and practice, and that is the highly productive, competitive, capitalist economy churning underneath. You can't just build the stadium and expect to win the championship without doing the practice.
So the crucial point we really need to take away from this is a pretty fundamental reality. Markets create wealth, and governments redistribute that wealth. The story of Scandinavia isn't about socialism defeating capitalism. It's an acknowledgement that you must first produce immense prosperity through free enterprise before you can even debate how to distribute it. You simply cannot redistribute wealth that does not exist.
Which leaves us with one final, genuinely humbling question to ponder straight from the source. How much can you produce before you distribute? It's a question every single society must eventually face, because if you want the benefits of the Nordic model, you first have to build the fiercely competitive capitalist engine that makes it all possible. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this helped pull back the curtain on how these fascinating economies truly operate. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.